Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Radnor Township School District Tuesday, December 15th, 2020 virtual regular business meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to report that the board met on executive session on Tuesday, December 8th to discuss personnel, safety and security, and Tuesday, December 15th to discuss personnel and legal. And we'll get right underway with our report from students. And who do we have with us tonight? Let's see, we welcome Avery and Austin.
And
Welcome, Avery.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, Austin. And then we also are going to be welcoming our new representative, Sammy. Welcome.
Yes, I hope you are all doing well tonight. As you know, tonight is my last night as the student representative to the school board, and I'll begin with my traditional remarks, and then we'll proceed to moving Austin to my position and introducing our newest student representative, Sammy Rosen, who is here with us tonight. The last time we met, fall sports were winding down with our Radnor teams competing in their Central League Championship games, and now, just a few weeks later, winter sports are ramping up. This past week, both boys and girls basketball held tryouts. However, these tryouts were far from normal. With a 10-person capacity placed on the gym, tryouts were conducted in small groups at staggered times. On the bright side, athletes received more individualized tryout and coaches were better able to evaluate each player than when there are 50 girls jammed in the gym, for example. But with this gym limit, players are curious to know how the rest of the season will unfold after their mandatory hiatus that's going on right now, as 5 players on the court for each team equals 10 people. But what about referees and coaches? Will substitutes have to sit outside of the gym during games? Will only half of the team be practicing at a time? Let alone all the questions about having to move virtual once games begin, hopefully in January. I had my own taste of the virtual experience during soccer season, and then with the virtual week following Thanksgiving, I re-entered the building this past week, and all I can say is, where did all of my classmates go? When on the virtual side, I truly didn't realize that so many of my classmates had begun to opt for the virtual learning environment. So when I returned back to the building, my classes averaged about 3 to 4 other students in the classroom, with one of my classes being just myself and one other student. Talking with other students, they've had similar experiences with small class sizes. So once winter sports go virtual, students are curious to see how slim their class sizes will really become. But that being said, Radnor students are impressive, to say the least. No matter the situation they're in, they strive for success, remain focused, and still give back to their community. Being able to not only be a part of, but also recount all that Radnor is doing has been one of the things that I love most about this position. I've met so many new people, peers, community members, and administrators who I will continue to talk to even after retiring my position tonight. Throughout my time here, I've been able to represent the student body on some of the most monumental changes that have taken place in Radnor in many years. First, the school start time change. When that was happening, we were actually presenting in person, and not only was I able to share the perspective of the student body, but also had the chance to listen to the deliberations of the sleep study panel, the board, and then ultimately travel to Harrington High School once our change was made to talk about our experience. From there, we were hit with a pandemic, completely changing the landscape of my position. It was now harder to gather information and communicate with my peers, fewer activities were taking place, and I still needed to give my monthly report. But with Austin and the board's support, we were able to do it. With the pandemic happening, what was next? Well, the summer that was usually pretty calm was met with deliberations regarding the mascot change and then the decision about if we should reopen schools in September. Few representatives will be able to be part of such a historic time in Radnor, and thus I am beyond thankful for such a rewarding position. Each board member here has allowed me to grow both as an individual and as a public speaker. With every monthly presentation, I feel welcomed and comfortable. Such an environment has given me the confidence to continue to be the voice of the student body, whether here presenting at a meeting or just out in the community. I can come to each meeting with small topics or things that are very pressing and important to the student body with courage and reassurance that the board members will take the student voices into consideration. I can't tell as well now, but when we were in person, I would see Mr. Batchelor writing a little note about something we said, and it truly showed how passionate the board is about listening to the student body and acting upon the points that we bring up in our remarks. Mr. Batchelor, you helped ensure that the transition from in-person to virtual was seamless for the student representatives. It was a simple act of making sure that Austin and I were kept in the communication loop that made our role feel very valued. During our virtual stance, you invited me to other virtual projects that were happening in the district, not only testing my public speaking, but ensuring that the student voices were always represented, and I thank you for that. Ms. Goldman, just like Mr. Batchelor, the way you have accommodated me and now Austin is more than I can thank you for. Between my sports and academics, 5 o'clock on a Tuesday night can be challenging for a policy meeting. But you were always communicating with me and reassuring me that if I ever needed to miss a meeting, I could send you any questions that I might have and you would answer, making the student representative voice heard yet again. During meetings, my questions or points of inquiry were never overlooked or passed by, but met with thorough deliberation or a clear answer of clarification. The appreciation you showed me and the value you put on our position made me feel that I was making a tangible change in the community through the policy committee, and there was nothing more that I could have asked for. To the rest of the board, thank you. You might not quite understand what this position has meant to me, but it has been a gratifying experience that has been filled with fond memories and improved skills that I will carry on well beyond my time in high school. To Austin and Sammy, I couldn't think of a better team to replace me. Best of luck, and don't worry, I'll be watching the YouTube live streams. Thank you.
Thank you, Avery. Thank you, Avery, and good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to build on Avery's mention of sports and say that students are saddened by the 3-week shutdown Governor Tom Wolf distributed. But despite the unfortunate news, Radnor Swimming held a virtual meeting last Tuesday, beginning their season. Because of the 10 people limit, a new pool deck entrance protocol was described to ensure safety for swimmers as well as coaches. After the meeting, the boys team stayed on the call to introduce themselves to each other, building a sense of community and strengthening the team's bond. Moving on to student government. Our sophomore students are configuring ways to volunteer on Martin Luther King Day and are organizing a Valentine's Day fundraiser for heart disease. Our junior student government just wrapped up their Letters for Elders box outside of the high school and are currently considering nursing homes to deliver them to. As far as the senior student government goes, their senior shirts are being delivered and will be distributed to the class soon. Our seniors are also discussing possible socially distant activities such as a drive-in movie night and are brainstorming different approaches for the more traditional spring events like prom. Furthermore, National Honor Society students have been working towards gaining their first semester hours. It's more difficult this year to find volunteer opportunities as groups are usually limited in size and there are minimal gatherings. But that being said, students are as engaged as ever, seeking out whatever opportunities they can to give back to the community. Along with that, Mr. McBride's annual Gifts for the Heart Drive is taking place this week. In previous years, students selected a card that would say, 5-year-old girl, doll. But this year, the cards only list a gift suggestion and will be set out for families to choose from the entire selection. Despite the different format this year, the gifts will still be helping families in need and during the holiday season. Care for Cancer is also making cards and care packages for cancer patients through Lisa's Army. Additionally, Students Helping Students is pairing up Radnor students with younger K-8 students at the Overbrook Educational Center. Many of these students are unable to hang out with friends due to the pandemic and might have 2 parents that work full-time. Thus, the position will both serve as a friend to talk to and catch up with and as a tutoring session. Radnor student ambassadors also plan on meeting soon to discuss ideas to act upon that give back to the community as well. As I've stated in the past 2 months, the Meister Singers class has been filming a winter spectacular to send to nursing homes. As of now, the final edits of the virtual show are being made, and the final copy will be distributed to the Hickman's Friend Senior Community of Westchester, Rosewood Gardens Rehab and Nursing Center, and published on Rad TV. Lastly, the juniors of the whole have been permitted access to the park in J-Lot with all of the legal documents being due last Friday. As a junior, I can say we are very thankful for this opportunity. Over the past year, I've had the privilege to work beside Avery. Avery, you were supportive from the beginning, guiding me through our monthly reports and reassuring me when I thought I messed up. Even last month, we had a laugh about how I stuck my tongue out in the middle of my portion. I'm so thankful to learn from you, and although you may not have noticed, you've taught me how to be more comfortable in front of the board, how to write better, and even how to plan better. I'm proud of this system that we've created, where we share ideas and choose topics to discuss each month in order to deliver information to everyone here and the district. Now that you've passed your seat on the policy committee to me, and tonight your position here, I'd say I have some pretty big shoes to fill, and I'll probably still seek some guidance as my participation increases over the next year. Thank you so much for being my coworker and especially my friend. Tonight, as we congratulate Avery for her devotion, we also welcome our new school board student representative, an active runner for Radnor and a member of Radnorite, sophomore Sammy Rosen.
Thank you, Avery and Austin, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Sammy Rosen. I'm so excited to be here and to have this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you and to representing the RHS student body.
Welcome, Sammy. We look forward to it. We're going to be recognizing Avery in a few minutes, but first we're going to have our report from Mr. Batchelor, our superintendent.
Thank you. It's great to see everyone. Welcome, Sammy, and thank you, Avery. And we have a moment we will be recognizing, actually, Avery, we have two recognitions, so so hang in there with us for you. We're gonna want to thank you for your service and welcome, Sammy, and good evening. It's good to see everyone. Good to see our board and community as well. So tonight I want to give an update on many items. So I'm going to jump from topic to topic and try to move quickly through them. There has been and continues to be a lot going on. We started off the year with the theme of change. We talked about change just from a standpoint of as a staff, as a community, with our students, and that has continued. I shared with our community the end of last week some changes based on from the State Department of Health, some changes that are guiding public schools in our Commonwealth. And that guidance was shared with you, I believe, as I said, last Friday. This is a summary document that shares some of that. I'm going to move some of the pictures so I can look at it. And what this document did in essence is that it set a 14-day rolling clock for all public schools in the state. And this 14-day rolling clock, we have to look and account for positive cases, and we have to track them over 14 days. But it's nuanced. It's nuanced that it's only the cases that are actually present in our building. So I'm going to share our dashboard in another slide that we've been sharing monthly. And we have some challenges now, as I tried to share in my email to the community last week, because our dashboard, we were publishing every case that we knew of, whether the student was in our building or not in our building. If we knew it was something associated with school, with our staff, with our coaches, we were sharing those cases that we knew of. Now for this 14-day rolling average that could result in a closure, a temporary closure, possibly 1 to 3 days, or possibly as many as 14 days. That is based on actual cases of students that are present in our building. So you can see in this summary sheet, it just gives the cutoffs about where those cutoffs are, which buildings. It's based on population of each school. So you can see Ithan Elementary falls into the small school size as part of the State Department of Health guidance here. Our medium schools are Radnor Elementary, Wayne, and Radnor Middle School, and our larger school being our high school based on the student population. So we will start trying to share. We're trying to figure out the best way to share this information, whether we're sharing it weekly. Parents have asked me since the email went out, oh, what is then the rolling day average? We see the dashboard. Does that mean we're at the cases we're about to have to potentially close? So our rolling cases right now, Ithan Elementary does have 2 cases. So we're just entering that band of 2 to 4 where we need to then consider a closure for a certain amount of time. Radnor Middle School has 2 cases, and they're not quite at that 4 to 6 band because they're a medium school. So we will be sharing this, and we'll be talking more about this moving forward. There is asterisks to all of this, because the reason those asterisks are there is that the State Department of Health, when they put this requirement in place, said that if you can contact trace, case investigate, and clean or disinfect the building, these closure times can be reduced. And we are continuing to get more information, and through discussions with the State Department of Health, with our local health department, about what does this really mean. The reality for us as a school district, as Radnor, we've been doing these cleanings and the sufficient, and I don't want to use the word sufficient, extensive cleanings daily. We hired additional staff from the beginning of the school year. We had up to 8 additional, we were somewhere between 6 to 8 additional custodial staff to help make sure that we could do all the cleanings on a daily basis, knowing that we've been experiencing cases since we opened in the fall. The contact tracing and the case investigation, we've hired additional supports, especially in our nursing offices. Our nurses' suites, our nurses have done an incredible job of helping us track our cases, and we're able to do that rather quickly. It does take time, and it isn't, it's intensive with our personnel, but we do it quickly. So there is opportunity for some of these to be shortened when they happen, but we need to prepare our community. We will be looking at rolling closures when we hit these numbers. The challenge with all of this as well is that we're collecting a 14-day average, and let's take Ithan Elementary. So we're at 2. Now we have a virtual day tomorrow. So we're already declared that tomorrow's a virtual day. That day can actually count because we're at 2 cases for Ithan as a closure for Ithan, even though we were just in the band of 2 to 4 and we weren't recommending it right now based on just the 2. But now that we are closing based on the weather, we can use that day to count towards the state's requirement of a closure. And when we return, if we return on Thursday or if we return on Friday, there's a lot of anticipation about Thursday. I'll get to that in a moment. That's another slide. But when we return, we will reset that 14-day clock for Ithan Elementary. So if you're confused and you need like a note card or some kind of cheat sheet for all this, you're not alone. We're all trying to figure this. We're all together trying to figure it out and wrap our heads around how to respond to this. Again, all of this, the goal is to make sure we are being responsive to the needs of our community. We are doing what we can do collectively as a community to limit the spread. I do get on my soapbox every so often. I will just for a moment again, the 2 most important things, the most important things I feel that we can continue to do as a community is 1, we fill out that app every morning. If you don't feel well, student or staff, and as challenging as that can be for a student or for a staff member, we know it's challenging, but if you're not feeling well, do not come in. The second thing is we all must be wearing our masks. Wearing masks, obviously, we're required in school, but also beyond the school day. In our community, the more we are wearing masks, the more we are not interacting with people when we don't feel well. Those are the things that are going to limit the spread as we move forward. So our community, our students have been just tremendous in how they have all chipped in. The response to these changes, I appreciate the support we've received from so many. I can understand the frustration, though, people have as well. So this will continue to evolve, I'm sure. We're going to continue to learn more as we move forward, but I just wanted to review this for a moment so everyone is aware of where we are with that information we shared. The next slide is the slide that we've been sharing, really since going back to September. And the reality to this slide, these were those initial guardrails, is we still share it, but working with the local health department, the Chester County Health Department, these guardrails, once we became open, no longer had such an emphasis and a guide for us. What really became more powerful for us, while we still look at this and monitor it, was our experience being open and hybrid. And that was the guidance we were receiving not only from our local health department, but the guidance that we were also receiving from the medical community, that our experience being open started to change how we were looking at these guardrails that were created before we were even open. But again, we want to make sure we're sharing these and we continue to update these each week on our dashboard. The next slide, we have what's also on our dashboard, and this is what I was talking about before. This is our positive case counts, where we've been listing not only by week, you can see on the one chart, by week our positive case counts, you can also see them by month, staff and students. This is every case that we as a district become aware of. Either we find out about it because it's through the school directly, or parents share with us, or it's a discussion with the health department. We are always reaching out to the health department with any cases that we become aware of or know about, but we also have that communication with the health department and with our families and community, and we've been posting all of those cases. All of those cases that will continue to be posted on this particular dashboard are not the cases that would necessarily be part of the 14-day rolling. The 14-day rolling that I shared in that other slide is very specific to students or staff that are actually present in the building at a time when they were potentially infectious, or during the time when they could have been spreading. And there is an important nuance difference, because we will put cases on this dashboard, and there's students who have never have set foot in our building. So those cases wouldn't result in us having to do part of that 14-day average and that rolling closure. So again, I understand it's confusing, but wanted to take a moment to share that with everybody tonight in the school board again. On our next slide, I get to change the topic a little bit, and a topic that seems to have, boy, sparked a lot of interest. I sent a message on Sunday, and I sent the message on Sunday to our community after I was a Saturday morning reading the Philadelphia Inquirer and talked about a snowstorm, I believe it was 1960, that came out of nowhere to surprise everyone with a massive snowstorm. And so started to talk about snowstorms and had me thinking about the predicted storm moving forward. And the question on everyone's mind: do snow days even exist now that we live in a virtual world? So for those of you who weren't watching or weren't part of our school calendar approval for next year, I want you to know that in Radnor, we have decided that as of now, snow days do still exist. So when we approved the calendar for next school year, we did leave a snow day in that calendar with the idea that when we have a large snowstorm, that we would still call a traditional snow day. Would there be one, maybe two a year, potentially? The reality, though, is as much as we all love a snow day or two, when you get to the second, third, the fourth snow day, no one likes making those up at the end of the school year. I think the only group within our community that doesn't mind when you start to get to the fourth or fifth are our seniors, because usually graduation dictates the end of the year for them, not the snow days. So what we said when we approved the calendar for next year is that instead of building in 4, we only built in 1. And then after 1, or possibly 2, or maybe there would be none in a given year, like last year we didn't have any, we would look to move virtually when we can. Now, what would preclude us from going virtually would be, power outages. I did get asked a question from the Radnorite. I thought it was great. They emailed me last night. Our school newspaper emailed me last night and said, "Mr. Batchelor, how many power outages do we have to have for you to call a school closure?" So I thought that was a great question. I can imagine some, creative minds thinking about how they want to declare that there's power out in communities. But we would be looking to see if a significant amount of our students can't access an online virtual day, or even our staff are unable, we would look to still call, a snow day if we have to, whether this year or in future years. So for this year, as you can see, tomorrow, we're making decisions ahead of time. We're making decisions ahead of time because based on our hybrid schedule, we don't have any room to try to do an early dismissal. It would be very challenging for us with the complexities of all of our bus runs. It's also because of our hybrid schedule, we have half days at the elementary for every student, where half the students are in the morning and half are in the afternoon. We have half the students coming in for a full day at the middle school and high school, half the students the next day. If we did a half day, we would lose some students, and actually it would be more disruptive to our instructional program. So I'm asking the community to be patient and bear with us this year. We're going to make our decisions in advance this year, and we're going to make our decisions based on the forecast. So the danger with that is some of these forecasts may not come true and may not actually happen. So we made a decision today based on the forecast. Our region is expecting snow tomorrow, expecting snow in the afternoon. So we made the decision that we would call a virtual day. I cannot, as much as I do like a snow day, it's hard for me to call a snow day when there's not a flake on the ground and no snow. So tomorrow I feel very good about our virtual day for our students. We're anticipating snow could start as early as noon. So that's why we made that decision for tonight for tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will reassess tomorrow evening what Thursday brings. And as I said in my message to our community, it may mean that we're back in on Thursday. It may mean that we have potentially another virtual day on Thursday, or depending with the forecast and the weather, it may mean we have a snow day and an old-fashioned true snow day on Thursday. Time will tell as we see the forecast and it plays out. So I hope that's helpful. I have enjoyed how this has become, I think we're all starving to talk about anything else but COVID. And I had several students who did email me after my message on Sunday, and they said, Mr. Batchelor, the snow day might actually be the closest thing to having something normal in our lives. And I thought that was pretty compelling, the students who have emailed me, since my message on Sunday. So more to come, but we are virtual tomorrow, K to 12, everyone is virtual. And then we will decide tomorrow night what Thursday brings. And I thank the community for their patience as we move through weather in this hybrid schedule. So on the next slide, we have a special recognition tonight. We have a couple of recognitions, but this one especially. So Patty Calderoni, Patty is the secretary to the superintendent, and not only the secretary to the superintendent, but Patty works tirelessly every day to work behind the scenes to put all of this together. When it comes to board meetings, Patty is the person behind the scenes, making sure that all the pieces come together, whether it's the agenda, whether it's the minutes, whether it's making sure all the documents are being posted. And she does it with an amount of grace. She does it with an incredible work ethic. And she comes every day to try to support, to help everyone else look better and to look great while she's working behind the scenes to make all of us look good. So I can't thank Patty enough for all that she has done, for the district, but also all that she has done for me. Patty has been with the district since, and I'm going to look, Patty, we've got you a gift. I don't know if I can catch it on camera here. We got you an ice bucket, Patty, and it's from the board and administration. And we have engraved on it RTSD 1998 to 2021, when the official, be 2021 by your official retirement date. I did get you something in the ice bucket. Depending how the meeting goes tonight will be whether or not it'll be here for you tomorrow. But Patty has had many positions in the district. She has worked at the high school. She has had several different positions here in the district office. She has impacted so many lives and has supported so many administrators throughout the years. And we are just so grateful for all that she has done for the district, and we're going to miss her. And I know there's some board members who wanted to make some comments as well, since Patty is that person that not only helps keep me organized each day, but also is a true resource and support for all 9 board members as well.
Yeah, I would like to say something. This is Lydia Solomon. So the secret of the board, Mr. Batchelor really let it out, which is that Patty is the one that holds this whole thing together. And she is such a thoughtful person. So I've served on the board for many years, and under normal circumstances, Patty orders us dinner and makes sure that everything is laid out and ready. She organizes us. She gets our board packets out. She makes sure that they're correct and on time. But the other thing that Patty does, she is present at all of our meetings, committee meetings and regular business meetings. So those of you who know that sometimes these meetings go to the wee hours of the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, Patty is patiently there listening and taking accurate meeting minutes. So there is really no way, to adequately thank Patty for all that she does. It would be deficient. So, but I'm going to try anyway to just say to Patty, thank you so very much for all that you do for Radnor and for just holding the board together, making sure that everything runs properly, and honestly just being a joy to work with, to be a part of the team. So just thank you very, very much.
Lydia, you did a lovely job. Thank you. You mentioned so many of the things that I was intending to. Patty, I'm looking at this picture of you sitting with Bev Norton and Kim McGuire. And I'm thinking about Maureen McQuiggan. And my wish for you is that when we get past COVID and you can have the time and the ability to go and spend time with some of those lovely ladies who are also enjoying, some of them are also enjoying their retirement, that you just have the opportunity to make the most of this time. You've been so gracious to me in my time as president, you know, seeing you every week when we were meeting in person, and always so gracious about, you know, edits and changes, and just rolled with the punches. And I'm really grateful for that good work and for your attitude through it all. So thank you. You have been a really important part of, you know, the transitions here. You know, it's one thing for you to have supported Ken, but you also were here with our other superintendents, you know, when Tony Costello was here and other interims. So really appreciate the important role that you played there. And for many years, Lydia, if I recall, you supported Maureen McQuiggan as well. So an integral part of upstairs. So I wish you the best on behalf of everyone on the board. Thank you so much.
So Patty, we can't thank you enough. This is the time where we're going to have Patty come on and do a long speech. No, I wouldn't do that to her. But we can't thank you enough for all that you have done to support all of us, and we will miss you. And I do know your cell phone number, and so don't go changing that. And I know you will continue to support us in the transition. But congratulations, Radnor has truly, the entire district has appreciated everything that you've done. Wanted to thank Avery again for your service. Avery, you've been just wonderful to have, and your flexibility, you and Austin's flexibility, you know, from our normal meeting structure to, as you mentioned in your remarks, to our online, you two were just seamless with it, and your leadership, Avery, in that was so much appreciated, and how you just took it and ran with it. You have done such a wonderful job, Avery, of sharing the insights from the students each month. You are incredible about trying to understand everything that's happening in the district, especially the high school, what is happening, and the perspective from many students. And I've truly appreciated and valued that. So thank you. We do have a moment where we're going to recognize you in just a minute. So more formally, the board wants to thank you. And I just want to welcome Sammy. Sammy, welcome. It is wonderful to have you join us. As I've shared with Avery and other students who have come before you, your voice is so important. Your voice is so critical. Our students have been with us, many of them from kindergarten to 12th grade. That student voice on topics and issues, I don't think students realize how powerful your voice is, and your experiences and what you share with us really counts. So I thank you for making the time to be with us, and welcome. And then I just have one last slide. I want to thank our donors this month. We have Radnor High School PTO. You know, to the high school, it was a distance learning playbook, and something I guess we could have used this year. It was helpful to have, so thank you. No, in all seriousness, it's been a great book that they help provide for all of our teachers. A technology fee to support 3 Radnor High School students, so thank you for your graciousness in supporting our students. The Radnor Education Foundation for their most recent grants, for the hybrid and virtual learning. Thank you, Ref. Again, I say this each month, but it's just so true. It really takes our entire community and everyone coming together, and the support that we get from all areas within our community, especially when we look tonight at our PTO and the Education Foundation. It's so much appreciated, and the support is needed, and it makes a difference. So thank you. And that's all I have for superintendent's remarks. Sorry for the lengthy remarks tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Batchelor. Okay, we're going to get right underway with our recognition tonight. We have Mrs. Goldman with the resolution of appreciation for retiring student representative Avery CIATTO.
Thank you, Mrs. Stern. And there's Avery. Hi, Avery. This resolution, Avery, is in appreciation for your having been a student representative to the school board. The resolution below has been prepared in recognition of that service. And as you have served as a student representative to the school board and to the school board's policy committee. Whereas Avery CIATTO has served the school district of Radnor Township, Delaware County, Pennsylvania from January 2019 until December 2020 as student representative to its board of school directors. And whereas Avery CIATTO has also served the school district of Radnor Township, Delaware County, Pennsylvania from January 2020 until December 2020 as student representative to its policy committee. And whereas during that time, Avery has represented the students of Radnor, presenting ideas and positions that have furthered the cause of effective and responsive educational principles and practices within Radnor Township School District. And whereas Avery has brought to the board an interest in service to education and a spirit of cooperation, now therefore be it resolved that in appreciation for Avery's service, the members of the Board of School Directors hereby recognize and honor you, Avery CIATTO, on this 15th day of December 2020. Now, that's a lot of formal stuff coming from a resolution. I just wanted to add for a moment some less formal words, but nonetheless, no less appropriate. Having had the opportunity to work with you, Avery, in a bunch of different capacities, but especially as the policy chair, you always came to policy meetings with abundant enthusiasm, preparation, curiosity, and great poise. With all the work I'm sure you had to do and other activities you were involved in at school, I'm sure the policy committee members would agree with me that it's amazing that you knew, we could tell you had done your homework. And as much as we thought we had done ours, this is why we have a student representative on our committees, because you always asked a question or made a comment that despite our best efforts could have only come from a student perspective. And that's why having students on our committees is so valuable. Your questions were always insightful, relevant, and really helpful to us as we did our work as on the policy committee. So you represented the value of a student voice in the mix in an exemplary fashion, and we'll be forever grateful for you for doing that. And honestly, it was just great fun to have a student in the room. As much as it's great to be around our fellow adult colleagues, it's always fun to have a student. So thank you so much for your really uplifting presence all the time. And don't be a stranger. Please come and visit us one way or the other in the future. So thanks again so much for your service. And I'll turn it back to Mrs. Stern.
Thank you, especially Mrs. Goldman. It's just been such an honor to be on this board, and everybody has helped me tremendously. And I know you're in good hands with Austin and Sammy now, but just like Mrs. Goldman said, I'll be back to visit. I'll be watching the live streams. Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Batchelor. Now we will be getting her certificate, and don't we usually give them their little nameplate, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yes. So we will get that to you, Avery, your recognition certificate, as well as your nameplate from your time on the policy committee. Thank you again. All righty, we're going to move into public comment. And at this time, the board shall provide an opportunity at our regular business meeting for eligible participants to comment on matters of concern, official action, or deliberation, which are or may be before the board prior to official action by the board as per policy 006. Ms. Gangle or Mr. Petiti, do we have any public comment tonight?
No comment tonight.
All righty. Well, let's see. I'm going to just read this in case there are people listening and want to participate later. As of the end of November, individuals who are interested in delivering public comment directly during the live virtual board meeting may now register to join on Zoom. Registration is requested by 6 p.m. of the meeting, but you can decide during the meeting that you would like to comment, then you may still be able to register, access the registration link if you would like to make a comment. If you are unable to attend the meeting and you would like to still mail in or email your comments, you may send them in. Oh, where's the address here? You may mail them in to Mr. Michael Petiti at 135 South Wayne Avenue, Radnor Township School District, Wayne, Pennsylvania 19087, or email them into boardcomments@rtsd.org. So maybe we'll have public comment later in the night, who knows? All right, we're going to get underway with item 7.1. It's a presentation, a review of our 2019-2020 district goals and our presentation of the 2020-2021 district goals. Mr. Batchelor, so this is going to be for information purposes only tonight.
Correct.
It's the beginning of, although it's a little delayed, but you have been busy this fall. We don't typically do our goals in the middle of the year, but it is just a whole new world. So Mr. Batchelor, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Stern. So we wanted tonight to share, an update, and it is, again, it is not an action item. The presentation tonight is an overview of district goals and priority projects from the previous year. And then we'll group both these items together, and we'll also then tie and move right into what are the proposed goals, the things that we've already, many of them have in place and working on this year. When we give the review of our goals from last year, you will see that, the work of the district, though COVID happened and created a whole new, a whole new amount of work obviously for all of us. There were things within the district that had to continue and move forward. There were other things that we realized, we can't focus on this right now. We need to be focusing on what the instructional program and other pressing priorities based on the pandemic we're all dealing with right now. So we want to provide that summary tonight. I have who's going to be part of this summary with me. We'll just jump in once I start the presentation, but just to let everyone know, Mr. Dan Bechtold, our Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning, Mr. Sean Dukevich, our Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning, Mrs. Jenny Lesage, our Director of Special Education, Dr. Scott Hand. Oh, Scott, I'm going to, Director of, what did we say for your title now? And I apologize. Information, give me it. I was going to say Director of Technology, and we just...
Technology, Innovation, and Instructional Design.
Innovation and Instructional Design. Thank you. You think I would remember titles that I helped come up with. But Mr. Bill Dolan, our Director of Operations, Mr. Vaughn Bryan, our Assistant Director of Operations and Security, will be joining us as well. And Dr. Jim Kearney, our Assistant Director for Teaching, Department of Teaching and Learning, will also be joining us this presentation. There's a lot of information in this presentation. So what we're going to try to do tonight for the school board is we're going to try to go through this quickly. And so they're going to get a lot of information. We'll take questions at the end, if that's okay. So let us get through the presentation. There's a lot of information. We'll have questions at the end. We will then talk about what are the proposed goals moving forward, and even a change to what we're calling them goals versus initiatives. And then we're not going to look for, we'll have an action item on these things in the January board agenda. So there's plenty of time between now and January for further dialogue, further questions about this topic. So I will move right to the presentation and I'll kick it off. So we want to talk tonight, when we look at our district goals and we look at district priority projects or initiatives, we always go back and look at and review our mission, our vision, and our core values. So I'm not going to read those to you, but that mission and our vision and our core values continue to guide us as a school district. It guides us each day. It guides us especially at a time when we look at designing and looking at our goals and initiatives for any school year. So that's why we wanted to begin with sharing that mission, vision, and core values. On the next slide, tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to, on one side is you can see the summary, and this summary document is posted for the public to see as well. It's been posted and shared with board members. The PowerPoint you're seeing tonight really is an executive summary of this larger document, the summary of the goals and priority projects from the previous school year. And then this other document on the other side of your screen, which is also posted publicly as well. These are the initiatives, the proposed initiatives for the 2020-2021 school year that we would have as an action item on the January board meeting. And we'll end by talking about those, and we'll talk about how this previous year's goals, priority projects have really led into what we are looking at for this current year. And And then there's just the summary of our goals and priority projects for the 19-20 school year. This is just a brief summary of some of the bulleted items. The board is well aware of where some of our focus areas were when we looked at goals, and then our priority projects that were for 19-20 were identified. So we want to share tonight a summary. This is just a real cheat sheet of those goals and priority projects that you're about to now hear a little bit more in depth of what each one of these represented, a very high level, quick summary from administrators. They're going to be very brief with a summary of each one and then some of the next steps. And we'll talk about how each one of these goals and priority projects in a way have led into and have helped develop what we're looking at this year. At many times, any one of our goals or initiatives that we look at, priority projects, are often span more than just 1 year. They often happen over multiple years, especially as we see here as the athletic infrastructure project, or we look at the implementation. It's hard to believe that we implemented new schedules a year ago at the high school. That seems like so long ago with everything else we've been dealing with. But often these goals and priority projects don't just span 1 year, they span multiple years. So we'll turn it over to the rest of the team to share a quick summary of each one of these.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you, Ken. The first goal is, of course, challenge and support all students. You may recall, it seems like an eternity ago, but last November of 2019, part of an annual process, we published the annual report of district data and student achievement, and that was presented during the board curriculum committee meeting. Additionally, at that meeting, each principal shared their respective progress toward the building goals for the previous year, as well as outlined their goals and action plans for the 19-20 school year. At that presentation, the elementary areas included writing growth and student achievement, a focus on that piece, a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion at all 3 buildings, implementation and enhancement of responsive classroom practices in all 3 elementary buildings, and a focus on, coincidentally enough, technology expectations for teachers. This was back in November of 2019. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Bechtold to discuss secondary areas.
Dan, I'm thinking your mic might not be on. You may be muted. I think Sean's going to run over to your office shortly.
I can speak for Mr. Bechtold. I think he's having mic trouble next door. So secondary areas included implementation of multi-tier systems of support at Radnor Middle School, a focus on 339 plan activities for college and career readiness, expansion and enhancement of the after-school tutoring program, continued implementation of the Radnor Middle School study recommendations, an exploration into freshman mentor and senior internship programs, and a continued focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Unfortunately, as we all know too well, COVID-19 and the impending school closures that occurred in March through the end of the school year did result in a lack of data that included PSSA, PVAS, our MAP assessment data, and typical surveys that would be taken at the end of the year that were all used usually to benchmark and evaluate quantitative progress towards the 19-20 goals. And so for those reasons, we were not able to fully evaluate those quantitatively. That being said, in a qualitative fashion, many steps were taken to support these goals. And again, on the elementary level, we implemented many new responsive classroom practices to support social emotional health, and that happened again in all 3 buildings. Our special education plan was developed through the special education department and our new school-wide Title I program at Wayne. Both of them focus specifically on implementing multi-tiered systems of support, again, MTSS for all students. And in different cases, personnel were added or reassigned to provide more direct supervision and support of MTSS. Oh, we're good, Dan?
Yeah, I logged out and came back in. So, all right. So as Mr. Dukevich explained on the previous slide, there was a number of different initiatives for challenging and supporting students at the secondary level. I'll briefly highlight one initiative from each building to give some additional context. At Radnor Middle School, Tier 3 MTSS academic interventions were approved in the program of studies in January of 2020. These courses complemented the Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions already in place at RMS. Over the past 3 years, Radnor Middle School faculty have received training on differentiation and core instructional practices to bolster our Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports for students. At Radnor High School, planning for the Freshman Mentor Program took place throughout the year. The goal of this plan was to match upperclassmen and teacher advisors with incoming cohorts of freshmen to provide supports to students as they transition to Radnor High School. This program kicked off this summer prior to our freshman orientation program known as Freshman Fundamentals.
Hi, the initiative for MTSS began in January of 2020 with a startup meeting with the Department of Teaching and Learning and the Department of Special Education, along with the MTSS specialists from the MCIU, Amber Malloy and Becky Mills-Paul. We started to lay out our plan when COVID closed our schools and shifted our focus. However, in July, we reinitiated our focus on MTSS with the MCIU team and included our implementation committee, which was roughly 25 staff representing all Radnor Township School District buildings and included school counselors, regular education teachers, special education teachers, psychologists, and 4 administrators. This was a 2-day training. And then in August, the support from the MCIU continued with the training for all the administrators, which was conducted during our administrative retreat. The training focused on the framework or the process of implementing MTSS and supporting everyone K through 12 for academics, as well as the social emotional behavior. This framework can and should take a district between 2 and 4 years, from the exploration stage to installation to initial implementation and finally full implementation. We are currently in the exploration stage. We have continued our implementation committee trainings this fall. Our TIPS training, or the Team Initiated Problem Solving training, took place on December 1st and consisted of 30 staff, K through 12, and administrators. We are planning a K to 12 training for all staff in February to continue this initiative. It should also be noted that the MTSS plan has been discussed within the special education plan, which was approved last spring, as well as the Title I school-wide plan. We will also include our work with MTSS within our upcoming Radnor Township School District comprehensive plan.
The second district goal was to continue the study of student wellness. The Wellness Study Leadership Team, which is comprised of Dr. Kent, Mr. Regal, and me, met periodically during the 2019-2020 school year to continue developing the Wellness Study Report and recommendations. In October of last school year, we also held a focus group with parents to hear their thoughts about the preliminary wellness study findings that were presented in spring 2019. We were scheduled to present the study recommendations in spring 2020, but that was postponed due to COVID. Although the presentation didn't take place, work has already begun based on information that was gathered for the wellness study. 2 examples of this are the homework task force that met last year and the work towards K-12 implementation of MTSS, as was shared on the update on the first district goal. Our next steps are to finalize the student wellness report, present those recommendations at the May Curriculum Committee meeting, and begin and continue implementing those recommendations.
RTSD also had the goal of implementing and evaluating new school schedules during the 1920 school year. Thanks to a multi-year study, Radnor was the first district in southeastern Pennsylvania to change school start times to follow CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines on adolescent sleep. Data was collected and input was solicited from various stakeholders throughout the 2019-2020 school year. Modifications and adjustments were made in order to be responsive to constituent feedback. While data was collected throughout the beginning of the school year, the advent of COVID-19 prevented data collection for a number of areas, including bus ridership, disciplinary incidents, nurse visits, tardy and attendance rates, etc. RTSD is committed to collecting additional data on the impact of the start time change once the COVID-19 pandemic ends and Radnor moves back to phase 1 on a permanent basis.
Goal 4 was to focus and refine the curriculum review cycle process. During the 2019-2020 school year, a task force of administrators, instructional coaches, and 2 members of the school board curriculum committee, Dr. Babson and Mrs. Solomon, met to review the current curriculum review cycle and make recommendations for improvement. In general, the group felt the current review cycle works well and a 6-year cycle continues to be appropriate, but we did have recommendations for refining and focusing each phase of that cycle. You can see the draft of the updated curriculum cycle schedule that is included in the materials for this evening's meeting. Because the curriculum review cycle was interrupted last year, we extended the current phases of the cycle from last year into this school year. Our next step is to present the updated curriculum review cycle with descriptions of each phase at the April curriculum committee meeting, and then initiate the revised process next school year.
The evaluation of post-secondary preparation, counseling resources, and outcomes was a casualty of COVID-19. This project was slated to commence in the spring of 2020, but was shelved due to the pandemic. RTSD has plans to re-examine post-secondary supports next year after the wellness study recommendations have been presented.
Okay, I got my tile on here. So this is an update on the accessibility and wellness project. Under the guidance of our steering committee, we proceeded forward with engaging an architectural firm, a land planning firm, and a construction management consultant to bring to the board a schematic plan, and that plan was approved in the spring, and it went into a design document phase. And despite the COVID closures, we were able to meet, to survey, and to proceed with planning. The next slide will be our next steps. So since July, we already started in on our next steps, which was moving into construction documents. We are currently going through land planning, permitting. We are in front of the planning review board at the township. In fact, tomorrow night we'll be at Shade Tree Commission for a review with the township. We're developing estimating, and then we will go out to bid in early 2021. We'll bring that bid to the board for recommendations and possibly the start of construction in this coming year. The high school isn't the only building that's in need of some capital improvements. So we have initiated a feasibility study. Breslin Architects, the same architects we're working with on the accessibility and wellness project, have worked with us this year also on the feasibility study and also Decision Insight. They've evaluated our enrollment projections while Breslin evaluated our properties. We have a report in hand. Our next steps, we're on the verge of launching a steering committee. The steering committee will evaluate the report with Breslin, and then we'll develop a long-range, big-picture facilities plan. And that'll look out 5, 10 to 20 years, and we'll bring that to the board this spring for recommendations. I believe Vaughn is going to do the next set of slides, but I'm not seeing his tile. He may have dropped off.
I am here. Can you hear me?
You are there. I didn't see. Okay, go ahead, Vaughn. It's all yours.
Good evening. Yeah, safety and security training. Safety training is ongoing. Our goal is to continue implementing training into our daily safety protocols and ensure that we are current with state requirements, including additional training for our security guards. We will continue with our improvements of our infrastructure and ensure the buildings are safe for our staff and our students. And the next step will be Radnor facilities and safety will continue with upgrades as planned. Radnor Township School District will continue to develop and adapt safety training and procedures within the COVID and health safety plan moving forward. At this present moment, we do have our Act 67 training ongoing with a few of our guards presently trained and continue to train a few more as we move forward. We continue to develop our adapt safety procedures within the COVID and healthy safety plan and our phase models.
The recommendations for the Radnor Middle School study were presented in June of 2018. Based off of the work of the RMS Study Committee, improvements were slated focusing on 3 areas: academic excellence, organizational structure and process, and organizational culture and climate. Throughout the 2018-2019 and 2019-2020 school year, the Radnor Middle School faculty and administration worked diligently to implement the recommendations. At this point, the middle school study recommendations have become part of the culture and operating procedure of Radnor Middle School. The Physical Education for Athletes Committee met last year to examine graduation requirements for students at Radnor High School. The work of the committee focused on understanding state graduation requirements and the experience of our student athletes, as well as offerings provided by other high schools. Throughout the summer, administrators reviewed feedback, and this fall worked diligently with high school PE teachers to develop recommendations to improve our program. In November, the administration presented recommendations to the school board for reducing high school PE requirements, as well as revamping course offerings for our student body. The next steps for this initiative are for the administration to work with high school health and PE, the high school health and PE department to revamp existing courses and also develop new course offerings. Administration also will be bringing revisions to Board Policy 217 on graduation and the corresponding administrative regulation to the Policy Committee.
Priority Project 7 focused on continuation of the technology integration study. And this was year 2 of the study in the 1920 school year. And COVID really accelerated a lot of the goals that the technology study had. We had started in 1920 looking at the tiered expectations of technology tools specifically for staff and students. And we also focused on the day of unplugging, which happened right prior to COVID, focusing on social emotional well-being, specifically using digital tools. We also were able to look at application integration, and COVID really thrust us into that position where we could move from using those tools into directly applying those in that online environment, which we were required to do. COVID was also an accelerator where we were able to open up our entire one-to-one initiative from K to 12, being able to supply all students with a personal learning device. As well, the online learning opportunities through COVID allowed the students to engage in deep and meaningful communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. And how COVID moved us into the next school year, our next steps for the 1920-21 school year. What we were previously looking on the, thank you, on the next slide, at the tiered expectations, we were moving from tools now into practices. So in the 3rd year, we're looking at specifically the integration and not just the click. So we're moving beyond those tools and looking into practices. And being the 3rd year with that quick acceleration that COVID had brought to us, we're looking at revising the goals for our technology study, being at the end of the 3-year goals that we had originally set, with focuses on areas such as blended learning, differentiation, personalized learning, and design thinking. We're also focusing on the transferable skills between multiple devices and multiple platforms. Our students and staff have access to a number of different devices, moving from iPads to Chromebooks to Surface Go's and Surface Pro devices, but also working in different online environments and making our students much more facile and familiar with all of the technology tools and software resources that are around. And finally, we're looking at our K-12 STEM and CS integration programs, being able to develop a comprehensive framework from K-12 of what STEM and computer science looks like specifically for the Radnor Township School District. And we have a cohort of teachers who are moving through the Pennsylvania STEM Endorsement Certification Program, specifically at the elementary level, who will be helping us compose what that model looks like moving into the future.
Thank you. And Scott, Dr. Hand, your focus on innovation and instructional design that you have brought to the department couldn't have been more well-timed. It was not only the initiatives that he just shared there, but also that focus on innovation and instructional design, and the timing for all that we're doing now was truly needed and has really been an inspiration. And we're excited to see where this all goes as well. There have been, as challenging as this year has been from so many different aspects, we are looking at what are the silver linings and what are those things educationally we're learning. So I want to thank Dr. Hand and his entire department for all they're doing. I think we may have, and I could be wrong, did we skip priority project number 1? And I could be wrong that we did that, the evaluate the post-secondary preparation, counseling and resources. Did we skip that, Mr. Bechtold, Dan, or did you mention that quickly?
No, we covered that.
You did. I'm sorry. And I just want to mention that one because I wanted to use that one as an example. That is an example of one that because of COVID, we didn't have the opportunity to get that study off the ground, but that is one that we want to move forward to fit under the umbrella of wellness moving forward. We believe that that study and looking at our secondary, our post-secondary preparation and our counseling supports, we believe will fit under that wellness umbrella. And we also believe that once we get through COVID, it's something that hopefully, depending where we are, it's something we can begin and start to look at in maybe the summer or next fall. But we didn't list it as an individual goal or priority project. And what's in front of you now on the screen are the initiatives for 2020, 2021. And I had an opportunity to meet one-on-one with many board members over the last month or two. One of the questions sometimes board members and administrators would ask over the last few years, what's the difference between a goal and a priority project? And really what we have done is we've brought those two terms together because often one person's priority project was another person's goal. Sometimes a priority project had more emphasis than a goal, or a goal had more emphasis. It really depended on what that initiative was. And each year we go about this setting our goals. I'm going to start calling them now moving forward. I'm going to propose tonight to the board that we call them initiatives. And we bring both those terms together to call them our Radnor Township initiatives each year. And these initiatives in no way sum up all that we do. What we do day in and day out, what our teachers are doing day in and day out, what our support staff from all departments are doing day in and day out. That is the most critical thing we do as a district. And the resources, the attention, the dedication that takes from the entire district and the entire team day in and day out is what's so important in our school district. So these initiatives don't recognize necessarily everything we're doing day in and day out. But what they do recognize is that our devotion and our commitment as a school district to continuous improvement, and also our district commitment to make sure that we're taking the time to look at things carefully. If we put 30 initiatives on our plate at any given year, I can promise you none of them will be done well. We had a very large initiative that was put on our plates in March, on March 13th, to be specific, of last year, that none of us could have ever imagined. And though we started preparing for it really in January and February, our minds couldn't really wrap our minds around all that was to come in March. And all that we have done with our instructional program since then. I think we even looked in, as a school board, all that we have done together. I think we had more meetings in the summer than we actually normally have in an entire school year. So I really think for your service, you've all served now well beyond your board years of a normal service based on the amount of meetings that we had just this summer alone. So as we look at initiatives for our 2020-21 school year, develop and implement instructional programs in response to COVID-19 pandemic obviously is a priority and continues. It continues to be a focus of all of us in the district working together. We want to not only make sure we are providing the best program we can provide for our students, our community, but we want to make sure we're also evaluating that program and trying to evaluate it moving forward. And we're going to continue to be having many discussions about what does the new year bring, what adjustments, what changes can we make. I think we all want to hopefully see some hope at the, some light at the end of this tunnel. And I do think there is reason to be hopeful on many fronts as we move forward into the new year. And we'll have more discussions about that as we enter the new school, as we enter the new year, not a new school year, but the new year, in early January. Next is continued focus on implementation of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. This is something that the district has been focused on in previous years, but we now, as a school board, we're recommending, and this is coming from our board, from the administrative team, and from our community, that we take the time this year to really take stock in those initiatives we have done before, to take stock on what is that Radnor experience and how does DEI play into that full Radnor experience, and what are those things that we as a district want to work on moving forward, and take the time to listen to our community so we then can set those goals, those targets, those recommendations, and those areas we want to work on in future years. So this year will be a year about listening in our goal, about understanding where we are as a community, understanding the initiatives we've done, and how those initiatives are going to move us forward, and to set those targets and those recommendations moving forward. Multiple tier systems of support. You heard Mrs. Lesage, Jenny talk about that. That has been a team effort from the instructional teaching and learning team, with working with technology, working with all departments. And as she shared, that is a multi-year process and program. And that if I could sum that up, I know that gets caught up in a lot of educational jargon, multiple tier system of sports. What is that? We are looking at making sure that our program doesn't allow any student to slip through the cracks, making sure that our program has systems in place so that we can target and design the interventions needed for each individual student. And so we can unlock that potential in all of our students, both academically, both socially, emotionally, from all aspects. We want to complete and update our student wellness study. And again, when we look at multiple tier systems of sport and wellness, some of these things start to fit under one large umbrella. But that wellness study, as I mentioned, we're going to be back discussing in the spring. We did a little bit of a shift with some of the wellness study when COVID hit, and we looked at what does student wellness look like. And that's one of the indicators and one of the things that we're continuing to understand this year is how are our students doing and how are our students responding, emotionally, socially, academically to these times. And also the study of wellness was about looking at our students from many different aspects, gathering the data, even without, let's take COVID off the radar for a moment, and how do we as a district move forward in those supports? And that's where we want to wrap that counseling piece in, but we're going to wait and do that, begin that, as I mentioned, in the summer or into the fall. We have continued to develop the Radnor High School ADA Accessibility and Wellness Infrastructure Project. You've heard so much about that, and you've already heard so much about the Wellness Project. So those are our main initiatives we're proposing. We would bring these forward, and the next slide gives the details behind these initiatives that are posted for our community. The next slide is just the document. I know you can't read it here. We've posted the full document for board and community to see, and board members, we can have discussions tonight if there's any questions, but also please feel free to reach out between now and January about these, and we'll bring this back in January, just this piece, not the recap, but we'll bring this piece back in January. So that concludes our presentation for tonight. And I know it's a lot of information. We try to do it as quick as possible. We can maybe open up the screen to see everyone again. And I don't know if there's any questions tonight. We're willing to field any questions tonight. Yes. Yes.
Who wanted to go first? Sarah, go ahead. Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the decision to fold the post-secondary counseling into wellness. I feel like, I know it was on last year's agenda. I thought it actually might have been on the district goals for the year before. I know it's been an issue that the board has brought up before. And my memory fails, especially during this pandemic, but I thought we had specifically pulled it out separately because we wanted to make sure it got treated separately and specifically, the same way the sleep study and the infrastructure project, which is also part of student wellness, got their separate designations. So I guess I'm not concerned so much what you call it, but when I look at the goals for next year and I see student wellness, nothing that's listed there for me says we're looking at post-secondary counseling. So maybe it's just that it's a missing bullet there, but I'm concerned that it's going to get lost and fall by the wayside. And I think for a lot of parents, especially as their kids are struggling through all of this and they're worried about how they're going to move on to the next phase and what college is even going to look like, or other post-secondary activities, I think just folding that into wellness could be a real disservice to those high school students and the anxieties they have about their post-secondary plans.
Yeah, and it's a good question. So there's two things. All the concerns about the anxieties and things that are happening right now and how that impacts our kids in college, that is happening. So by removing this particular goal, remember, this was a goal that was created pre-COVID. And it was a goal to look at and understand what was our preparation, especially from a counseling services and our preparation for our students for post-secondary. And that's a very time-consuming process to make sure we do it well. And we really don't have the ability right now. We have to look at taking something else off the list. If that's something that we're going to do this spring, then we have to really think about what are these other initiatives we're doing. And so we don't see us having the ability to do that well this spring from the standpoint of, now take COVID off, not looking at COVID, but from a standpoint of what are those best practices and how well is Radnor preparing kids and through the counseling process for that post-secondary experience. So we realized that the best bet to do that well would be something that would maybe begin in the summer or the fall next year, depending where we are with COVID. As to the question about college preparation and COVID and what about our kids right now, our counseling department, our high school administration has been making remarkable, I think, changes and being very responsive to what does this new terrain of COVID world and counseling mean for our kids. And they're continuing to do that and adjust, and they will continue to do that without that goal. But I do think it's something we could add as a bullet. It's not under that. It could be under wellness. The other thing is that many board members expressed to me in conversations that couldn't we start to bring some of these things together under one umbrella? And wouldn't this really just fit under, wellness? So it's something that we could add, but I don't see us getting to it this spring. I really don't. And it's not that it's not important, but we have to make decisions about what things do we, looking at everything that's on everyone's plates, what things do we have time to do well and to give the devotion that's needed?
Well, and maybe it belongs under diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, I'll tell you, I've had parents say to me that they are hiring their own separate outside counselors to help their kids prepare for college because our program is insufficient. And look, that may just be Radnor parents' anxiety. I understand, every community is different, but they were saying that before COVID. So if that's genuine, if they're even halfway accurate, then the kids whose parents can't afford to do that or don't know to go do that are the kids who we're really doing the disservice to. So look, if it needs to fall under another heading, I understand that, but it's been a district goal for a while, and to leave it off the list, I'm just very concerned that it will fall by the wayside in future years because it will have not been listed somewhere.
No, and this is important discussion. So the feedback is helpful, and I'm sharing with you why the decisions were made. But it's something we can administratively certainly we have between now and next month to look at and evaluate. And I would agree, there are many topics that do fit under multiple umbrellas. When we look at diversity, equity, inclusion, wellness, and MTSS, those three things complement one another in many areas.
Do we have any other questions, comments, feedback? Bradley, go ahead. Sure.
Mr. Batchelor, and you and I talked about this before, but for the benefit of everyone, how much can that first goal about develop and implement instructional programs in response to the COVID-19 pandemic relates to how do we get through COVID? How do we get through the pandemic? And how much of it can also be imagined as how do we take lessons learned from how we adapted to COVID and apply them moving forward to our instructional program, even as COVID fades away?
Both. So we've had administrators who've already had meetings talking about and I think you're going to start hearing some of these discussions in the coming months. What does this mean for us from an instructional program moving forward? What are the things now? Can we try to just catch our breath for a moment, even though we're caught in this, trying to figure out how do we potentially move to phase 1? Can we hold on to phase 2? We're looking at 14-day counts and staffing each day and all of that. We've tried to step back and also say, what is it that we are doing now that we're going to, once COVID is over, we may want to continue or we want to build upon that could be change, could be a positive change for the better for our teaching and learning program and our instructional program. So it is both of those things. It is not only responding to the here and now and continuing to evolve and adjust, but it is also identifying the long term. And that's exciting. And that's where Dr. Hand's, the innovation instructional design piece, that's where our teaching and learning department come together, and it's all departments looking at how we move forward and what are those things that we're learning now that we can implement in future years.
Thanks. That's my only question.
Anybody else? I know, Amy, you look like you were reaching in. Do you have anything?
Yeah, just a quick question. The homework committee was mentioned. Was that under, could you just refresh whoever was mentioning that? Refresh where we are with that.
I mentioned that as part of the update on the student wellness study because homework was one of the topics that fell under social, emotional, behavioral wellness. Probably Mr. Bechtold will be the best person to update the status on that because he was one of the co-chairs of that task force.
Certainly. So in the spring, Dr. Stevenson and I conducted meetings of the homework study committee that comprised parents from K to 12. I believe we had 3 meetings to gather feedback. We are continuing to explore the feedback that was provided to us by the committee, and we'll have further information about that when the wellness study is presented in May.
Okay, I just wanted to add also just a sort of an overarching comment that there is a lot of work that the administration has been doing for the past several years add a pandemic when you have to reimagine how to deliver an educational program to students K through 12 to that. I know everybody on the board feels this way, but I just wanted to make sure it was said out loud that this is going through this presentation, there is a heck of a lot of work that you all have been doing throughout the past couple of years. And I think it's safe to say that we notice, we're really appreciative. It's amazing that you can keep all these balls in the air. And if there's something that has to be pushed off for a little bit, I think that that's understandable as you've all worked so hard to reimagine how to deliver an educational program in the midst of a pandemic and for the first time in 100 years. And of course that extends to all the employees in the district, and parents and students are all navigating new terrain. So if we're asking questions about this, that, or the other thing, I hope you understand it's within the context of recognizing that what you're doing is a pretty Herculean feat. I had a couple other questions, but I'm going to move on, let someone else speak now too.
And I'll just say,
Amy, oh, sorry.
I'll just say sometimes too administratively and all of our staff, our teachers as well, we're sometimes our own worst enemy. We want to do a lot. We have an incredible staff, and when they recognize something that we can do better or we can adjust, people are eager to do that. So we do have to be smart, though. We have to be smart about what are those things that we can tackle and make sure we do well. But at the same time, this dialogue is important about how do we manage those. And I do want to I want to thank Amy for those comments, because the administrative team, and thank the administrative team, it is, and I know the board recognizes it as well, it's incredible the things that have continued even while at the same time through all of COVID. And I am just so grateful for all their work.
I did just want to, one of our overarching principles of the past couple of years is sleep. So just want to make sure that everybody's also fitting in some time to sleep, that we practice what we preach and make sure that we're well rested, because that also helps with our immune systems as we're battling a pandemic. Susan, did you say that you wanted me to one other just comment to make? You want me to go now, or let others say what they want to say?
No, I mean, I think it's probably more efficient for you to just
okay,
kind of, have your time.
So one thing that just has been our practice in the past few years when we have these district-wide goals, and Mr. Batchelor, I know that you're going to sort of smirk at me when I say this, so I'm ready for that. But would it be possible to give us full board updates? I know some of these things come up through committee, but in the interest of efficiency, because these are board, they're called district initiatives, but they're essentially approved by the board and have, robust boards contribution and support. Could we be receiving full board updates as we go along with some of these initiatives?
I'll get some smirks out of other board members. I think we'd be happy to set up work sessions where the whole board meets to have a work. I'm joking, but yes, we have developed we have developed a practice though of that when we have a topic that is a district initiative, that we will often call a committee of the whole, and we can try to continue to do that. And I will look to the board leadership to just help remind me and everyone as we move forward that we plan that accordingly. We've done that now in the last month or so with facilities, and made them facilities committees of the whole when needed. And when it's something that is a district-wide initiative, it does make sense to do that. And I think that model has worked well without us having to go to a full board work session model.
And just to be clear, I'm not asking for more work. I'm just asking for, if you are so inclined, to extend the invitation maybe to the rest of the board who wouldn't necessarily be on that committee, as long as it's not extra work for you.
No, we can, that we are very much open to that, and can continue to talk about that as leadership.
Ooh, fire engine.
Yeah, I'm close to it here. There.
All right, thank you.
Is anybody else? I know I have a couple of minor questions. Okay, Ken, first of all, thank you. Remember back in the days when all you had to do was goals and priority projects? Remember those days back before COVID when all you had was too many goals and too many priority projects? It's extraordinary to me that as you were going through the things that that were goals in 1920, and giving us an update and talking about what kind of where the status of things for this year. It's extraordinary to me that you're all even able to be thinking in that way. So thank you. And you're right, we do need to be able to deal with the pandemic and deal with the impacts of it and phases and changes from the state and all that, and continue forward in being innovative and progressive and moving our district forward. So I really do want to acknowledge and appreciate you for that. So what I'm hearing from a vernacular standpoint is that you would like to move away from the word goals and priority projects and just call it initiatives. So that's, that will be our new terminology. It's ambitious for next year. That's you've got an ambitious list there. I have three questions. Two are kind of specific. Well, and I think they are, knowing that this is midway through the year and that the update for 2020, 2021 was that there was an intention for the recommendation on the gym, the phys ed requirement to have been made last June. Theoretically, our board would have responded over the summer, and those tasks of changing the graduation requirement and updating the policy to reflect that change, that all would have happened before the start of the school year. How do you envision rolling that out for this year? Or, the students, you're not making the change for this year. Will that change be implemented for the 21-22 school year?
Yes, I'll let Mr. Bechtold, Dan can jump in there. But yes, the change would go into effect for, for this coming fall would be the plan. Am I correct?
Yeah, so the actual change to the program of studies would be presented at January for the high school program of studies that would go into effect next year. Students would do their course selection, and that would be what the board approved with the quarter credit of swimming. The one change as far as the policy is concerned, this year we had students in grades 10, 11, and 12 that did not take a PE class. So the policy in AR would need to be reflective for our current seniors who would be half a credit shy of PE for graduation. That was something that we presented to the board over the summer. And so we would just need to circle back with the policy committee to make that. But the board did vote when we met, I believe it was in July, to go and allow 10th, 11th, and 12th graders not to take a PE credit to allow us to reduce the class sizes for our freshmen because of COVID.
I forgot about that. That seems like such a long time ago.
I know. And just anybody who's just listening to that, our students aren't going to be short credit. They'll be fine. We'll make the adjustments for them. The decision we've already made as a board of what we've changed, we do want to go back and put that all in policy moving forward.
Sure. Right. We'll codify that decision. Great. All right. The other question is maybe for Dr. Hand. So as we ramped up our technology plan this year in response to COVID-19, we basically accelerated what was supposed to be, I think it was a 3-year plan. So what I'm thinking about is there's going to come a time in the future where we're going to have another bump of a need for a technology refresh, because we infused so much new technology this year. So this isn't a question you have to answer tonight, but I'm just thinking about moving forward, we'll make some kind of intentional plan to smooth out that tech refresh that we basically created this year by virtue, because of COVID. Would that be an accurate way of saying that, Scott?
Sure. So to a degree, yes, we've already begun plans for that. So we've already created a 9 to 10 year sustainability matrix and framework for our refresh cycles. And what we had developed is basically a leveled cost refresh cycle. So we can develop predictable costs. So now that we've moved into this model, we have consistent refresh cycles at kindergarten, 3rd grade, 6th grade, and 9th grade. And we can predict those across every 3, 3, and 4 years. And those costs actually begin to level out beginning next year. So we will have same ongoing recurring annual fees so that we can have a more balanced and predictable budget. So we won't have those large spikes going into the future. So now that we are into this cycle, we won't see those major purchases because they will occur at regular intervals. As such, will our staff updates, and being able to fit those in, we know when those costs are coming, and they're much more level over time.
Yeah, and I was actually more thinking about the staff, when we made the decision to move forward with, I think it was the Surface Pros for all of the teachers, I think a little faster than we intended. Again, it was just more of a long range. We did definitely have to adjust. It was the right decision, but it definitely had an impact on what was, intended to have a different way of approaching technology. Yeah, I don't really, I mean, Ken, I think, as I said, I think it's all very ambitious. You have a phenomenal team. So, but I also want to acknowledge you. It cannot be easy to tell a board, hey, there's something we didn't get to and we're not going to be able to get to it. And, you know, if you want us to get to that, then what do you want to have? I mean, basically what you're saying to us is if as a board, we want you to perhaps, you know, to Sarah's point, the guidance, the counseling segment, which I do think is really important. And, you know, it may belong under DEI, it may belong under student wellness. You know, it is critically important, and it is something we've talked about for a long time, but I think it was a really fair thing for you to say. If we made a decision to move forward on that, you know, something would need to come off your plate. So I really want to acknowledge you for just being honest about the resource called your administrative team's capacity to do, you know, we can't do everything. And that's not a knock against the one Sarah raised. I actually think that one is extremely important. It is just the pragmatic reality of if this, then not that. And, you know, maybe you'll hear feedback over the next month and something will shift slightly, but I just wanted to acknowledge you for even being really straight about that, because that is just the reality. And that was always the reality. And it was more so with COVID.
No,
you know.
Thank you. And just because something might not be noted here, again, keep in mind, it doesn't mean we're not changing and making improvements in whatever that area is, you know, as we're moving forward. We don't just have this attitude of, you know, as I said, these are initiatives. There is a lot of day-to-day work that is not being captured, and a lot of day-to-day improvements, continuous improvement that's happening in many areas across the district that we're not going to capture in these initiatives as well.
Okay. Yeah. Amy, you said you have a couple more quick questions.
Yeah, two. One about the curriculum review cycle. I might have misheard, but I thought there was something that you said was someone said was attached to these materials and I didn't see them. So it's not urgent to go through it tonight, but I was just wondering if I misheard. Is there something about what was done with the curriculum review cycle that was attached to something tonight?
So I was referring under the review of the Radnor Township District Goals and Priority Projects document, at least the digital version of it.
Okay.
There's a link under the goal on focus and refine the curriculum cycle process. There's a link to a document called Curriculum Cycle Schedule.
Okay.
And that's the draft of the updated curriculum cycle schedule that I was referring to.
Okay, so that's posted too with tonight's materials online on board docs is what
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was my first thing. And the second thing was some of the work that was done, particularly when it comes to a district goal, involves a community committee. And just as a reminder out there, not to add any work, but I know that the community invests a lot of time and energy and passion. I sat on the homework committee. That was a pretty packed room in the LGI for each of those meetings. And I guess I would just ask if it's possible, as you move forward with some of this work, to close the loop with those people who gave their time and energy and commitment to be a part of that, just to let them know if they're not following along necessarily with these meetings. And of course, there was the disruption of COVID, to consider maybe keep sending that committee a note, sort of like we did with the PE committee and we've done with other committees, to just say, here's where we're going kind of thing, and close the loop.
That's a good point, because especially with COVID, let's take it seems like school schedules and the whole sleep that feels so long ago right now. And it's hard to believe it was, last school year that we were evaluating, that it went into effect and we were evaluating it. It was, the school year a year ago. So we want to make sure that committee and those who served on that they're aware that, hey, we've put all that on hold right now. And I'm sure they understand that and know that, but that communication to those groups is a good idea, just as an email, and let them know what the status is.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Ken, you'll be bringing that back to us next month, I guess, for board approval.
Yeah, we'll bring it. It'll be on the agenda for the January board meeting, just the initiatives. But by all means, please, board members, reach out to me individually with additional feedback between now and January.
Great. All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you to the whole team for being here to give their pitch and their updates on the work that's been going on so far. We really appreciate that. All right, we're going to move right into our committee reports. First up is our curriculum committee report. Ms. Solomon.
Thank you. The curriculum committee met on December 8th. On your agenda tonight are several items that went through the curriculum committee. They include acceptance of the district's learning playbook and technology fees to support the high school students from the RHS PTO, acceptance of technology support grant from the Radnor Education Foundation for an additional $12,000. This is in addition to the $66,000 that we approved in November, and approval of a new student club. And in addition, there is also an addendum to an employee contract for ABA technicians. Our agenda items at the meeting were an update from the high school principal, Ms. Kefkis, regarding the fact that we're not going to have finals or midterms at the high school this year as a response to the COVID-19 situation. And so there was a readjustment of how grades will be calculated. And then the bulk of our meeting was spent receiving an update from Dr. Stevenson on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. And included in that were definitions of what we're really talking about, a review of what's happened in the district so far, and then we received a timeline of what is planned in the upcoming future, which will include several meetings of various stakeholder groups. And I want to just sort of summarize at this point that the initiative is taking the approach of a bottom-up, if you will, sort of communication structure. So these meetings that are being convened with different groups are really going to start the conversation. And so everybody's welcome to, start or get involved, say your point of view. I mean, that is sort of how the initiative will take shape, is to sort of see where we are right now. We will be having 2 curriculum committee meetings in January. They're scheduled for January 5th and January 19th at 5 p.m. Thank you.
Great. Next up, we have our facilities committee report. Ms. Dunn.
Yes, the facilities committee did not meet this month, but we're going to make up for it and meet twice in January, where we will have a very busy agenda because we're going to be talking, the whole board is going to meet, and we're going to be talking about the wellness and infrastructure project at the high school. Those meetings will be held on Tuesday, January 5th and Tuesday, January 19th. Both of those meetings are scheduled currently to be held at 7 o'clock.
Super. All righty. Let's see, the finance committee meeting, we met December 1st, and on our agenda tonight for approval are, of course, our monthly financial reports. We have an approval for, speaking of student wellness, we have an approval of a contract for some additional counseling services. And this is actually being paid for with a grant from some COVID grant money. So that's great. And we also have on our priority action item, we will be approving the 2019-2020 audit report. And we have Mike Mood from BBD, our auditors, here tonight. We'll be doing that presentation in just a few minutes. As a point of information, we got the renewal amount for the 21-22 contract with Delaware County Community College. There'll be a slight increase, a little bit over 1.5%. That's not up for approval tonight, but we did get that information. And we have our renewal of the workman's compensation insurance. We went with a new vendor last year, which, although we are seeing a slight rise this month due to some specific claims, we are still seeing a savings over our old vendor. The other item that came up after our our finance committee meeting is, and it's on our agenda tonight, is the approval of for our potential tax assessment appeals to the Court of Common Pleas. This is actually a standard item we usually have in our December meeting, just to meet a December deadline, December 31st. It really has nothing to do with the reassessment this year, but we did add that to the agenda for tonight. And our next committee meeting will be January 12th at 6 p.m. All righty, policy committee report. Ms. Goldman?
The policy committee met on Tuesday, December 1st at 5 o'clock, and section 14 of our consent agenda is dedicated to policy tonight. Most of the policies have to do with our work to respond to the new Title IX regulations that apply to school districts and relate to the reporting and investigating of harassment. So the agenda item 14.1 is a policy that's up for first reading. It's policy 348, unlawful harassment. That's the one that applies to employees. And the new proposed policy title will be harassment, just like we're changing for 248. Agenda item 14.2 are two policies for first read for repeal. They're 448 and 548, which are also unlawful harassment. They have the same content essentially as 348. They're just in different categories of the policy manual for different categories of classifications of employees. And just as a reminder, as we review employee policies, it's the recommendation of our solicitor that we start to merge all of our employee policies into one comprehensive employee section of our policy manual. So you'll see that happening as time goes on. And then agenda item 14.3, we have three policies for a second reading, which means if they're approved, they'll be adopted as of tonight. It's policy 248, again, unlawful harassment. Policy 815 and 829. 815 is the acceptable use of internet and network resources, and 829 is personal electronic communication devices. These policies were identified for review and revision as part of a routine review of the policy manual. And due to the pandemic and the fact that a substantial amount of instruction for the 2020-21 school year is being conducted virtually and via technology, administration felt it was advisable to review these policies to make sure that they reflect current and best practices. So we'll have three that are adopted tonight. Our next policy meeting, committee meeting, will be on Tuesday, January 12th. And I also just wanted to quickly mention something that perhaps I should have mentioned at the last business meeting, which is that a slight change was made. It was non-substantive to policy 005. It was discovered that there was a section of that policy that had the heading board liaisons, and it actually spoke to board committees. It's our organization policy. And so that word was changed, and I'm required to let you all know that, even though it's non-substantive, and you've probably seen, if you wanted the hard copy, the revised version of that, and it's been posted to board docs, but I was required to mention it, so I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, Government Relations and Communications Committee, Dr. Babson.
Well, this is going to be short. We didn't meet in November, so that's my report. But our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, January 12th at 7 p.m.
Great, super. All right, we're going to move into our priority action discussion item, which is 9.1, a request to accept the local audit report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020. The recommended action is that the board accepts the audit report for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020, as prepared by BBD LLP, Certified Public Accountants. May I have a motion and a second, please? A motion from Ms. Solomon, second from Ms. Goldman. And tonight we have Mike Mood from BBD, that's our auditor, here, as well as Ms. Deco is here as well. So I'm going to turn this item over to Ms. Deco.
Thank you, Susan. We had Carl Hogan at the facility or the finance committee meeting, and he gave us an overview to the committee members. And he also typed up an executive summary, which was included with your audit report that was distributed last week. You will get your bound copies of the audit report the next time we do a board distribution. And so I'll turn it over to Mike. Mike will give us an overview and answer any questions that you may have. This will probably be repetitive for those individuals who are on the finance committee, but he can give us a broad overview before you vote.
And I did just welcome Mr. Mood. I did suggest to the board that if they had a chance to watch our committee meeting, I thought that the questions and the explanations that were given were quite illuminating. So hopefully this will be a relatively short discussion tonight. Welcome.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to do is just kind of walk you guys through the executive summary that should have been distributed to all of you probably last week. Just at a very high level, I know Carl, like Michelle just mentioned, went through everything in more detail 2 weeks ago when he met with the Finance Committee. So I'll try to keep it a little bit more high level, but be sure to chime in, ask any questions that you have, and I'll address them as thoroughly as possible. What I liked, go ahead.
Just a second. So because he's going to go through page by page, jump in if you have questions, just jump in because it'll be hard to go back and forth and do questions all at the end. Okay, guys? Thank you.
Yeah, so the first couple of pages 1 and 2 is our independent auditor's report. It's a very lengthy, wordy report. So I'm just going to break this down into a little bit more manageable, digestible sections. Really what this is doing is outlining the scope of our audit and outlining management and auditors' responsibilities. Management's responsibility is to prepare the financial statements in accordance with GAAP, and our responsibility as auditors is to conduct the audit in accordance with government auditing standards as well as generally accepted auditing standards. The last part of the first page is our opinion, which is unmodified or a clean opinion, meaning that the financial statements that are presented here are materially accurate in accordance with accounting principles accepted in the United States. The second page provides a little bit more detail about the comparative information that's presented in the financial statements, just indicating that the summarized 2019 information was done so from the prior year audit in a more summarized manner. The next section talks about required supplemental information, which is the MD&A, the budgetary comparison schedule, as well as the OPEB and pension schedules that are provided in the back of the audit report. Those are required to be included in our supplementary information. We don't offer an opinion on those, but we do apply certain limited procedures to those reports, such as making sure that they're reasonably accurate in comparison in relation to the financial statements that are presented. There's also some combining and individual fund financial statements that are in the back as well. Those are just additional supplementary information schedules, as well as the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. Beyond the audit report on pages 1 and 2 is the management discussion and analysis, or MD&A for short. This is an area where if there's any newer board members, that this is a good section to review. Pages 3 through 14 provides a little bit more of the financial highlights and summarized condensed information that is a little bit more, less wordy and a little bit focuses a little bit more narrowly on the highlights as opposed to the full 70-page document that you have in front of you. Pages 3 and 4 include some of those financial highlights that talk about some of the changes year over year, as well as kind of introducing some of the impact that COVID had on the financial statements that are presented. Pages 4 and 5 is more of an overview of the financial statements. So it talks about the different funds that you have, governmental fund financial statements, proprietary fund financial statements, such as your food service fund, and the fiduciary fund financial statements, which are your student activities and your scholarship funds. So it provides a little bit more explanation as to what's included and the purpose of those statements throughout your audit report. Pages 6 through 8 is some condensed financial statement information. So the financial statements that this is based upon are on pages 15 and 16. This provides it in a little bit more summarized view, talking about current assets and current liabilities and things of that nature, as opposed to providing the detail between cash and receivables and some of the more detailed information that's provided on pages 15 and 16. Pages 9 through 11 talk about your governmental funds. You ended the 2020 fiscal year with a fund balance of about $32 million across all your governmental funds. That was an increase of just over $3.1 million from the prior year. Most of that relates to your general fund. The general fund ended with a fund balance of just over $24.6 million, which again was an increase of about $3 million year over year. Of that $24 million fund balance, about $17,000 is considered non-spendable. That's just related to prepaid expenditures. That's just an accounting methodology that requires it to be presented that way. You also have commitments for various things such as capital projects and technology initiatives, leaving about $8.2 million, which is considered unassigned fund balance at the end of the year, which is exactly 8% of the 2021 fiscal general fund expenditure budget. And that's within the guidelines prescribed by PDE in terms of maximum allowable fund balance that's unassigned at the end of the year. Additionally, through those pages through 9 through 11, there's some additional general fund analysis that's provided. Talks about the reliance of the district on tax revenues. About 80% of the district's revenues is related to local tax revenue. That the revenues went up about $1.6 million year over year, increased a little over $800,000, largely due to the millage increase from the fiscal 19 year to the fiscal 2020 year. There's also some additional information provided on the next few bullet points about some changes year over year in some of your expenditure line items, as well as the variance explanations related to those changes related to the general fund. The capital projects fund decreased about $400,000 year over year, leaving an ending fund balance of just about $4.9 million at the end of the year. And then also talks briefly about your debt sinking fund requirements, which are also presented in your governmental fund financial statements. Page 12 provides a little bit more information about your general fund budget variances to your actual information. This again is just a summarized version of what's presented on page 50 in your audit report. It talks about the changes in revenues from budget to actual. They were higher by about $468,000, or about 0.5% versus budget. And expenditures and other financing uses were about $3.6 million less than budget. So that was a positive or favorable variance from your actual results in relation to your budget by about $4.1 million for the year. There was included in the budget what was the presumed use of about $1.1 million of fund balance. And that was not needed due to the fact that expenditures ended up being less than anticipated during the course of the year due to some of those closures near year end. Page 12 also talks a little bit about the district's capital assets. You had about $85 million invested in capital assets, largely related to buildings and improvements at the end of the year. The next page, page 13, talks about your non-current liabilities. These are largely comprised of your bonds and notes payable, which were about $84.5 million at the end of the year. That was a decrease of about $3.5 million or 4% from the prior year. The other largest component of your non-current liabilities is your pension liability related to PSERS. That went down by almost $4 million from the prior year, or about 2.6%. So you ended the year just under $145 million in terms of the total pension liability related to that PSERS plan. And then beyond your non-current liability section, pages 13 and 14 talk about—
Pardon me, Mike, I have a quick question about that.
Yep.
I think I just saw an article in the paper, and it's talking about this whole thing that when the market takes a hit, the taxpayers end up making up the difference in the PSERS funds. Is that this obligation is just as it's what's calculated as of today, assuming that the PSERS fund at the state level is doing well, correct? This number would change dramatically if we took a big financial hit in the stock market or the world or whatever.
So there's a presumed discount rate built into the actuarial analysis of about 7.25%. It also, in your financial statements in the footnotes, it provides some sensitivity analysis. So it tells you what the liability would be as of today if the discount rate were to have gone up 1% or to go down 1%. So it'll give you a presentation of what that change would be. But it's also important to point out that your financial statements, although they're presented as of June 30th, 2020, your PSERS pension and OPEB liability information is actually based off the analysis for the year ending June 30th, 2019. So that's presented a year in arrears. So the markets obviously did pretty well through fiscal 2020. So I would assume that, you know, you're not going to see any big hit related to the expectation in terms of return on investment that's built into the actuarial analysis. If that changes in the future, I think it'll be more in another year down the road in terms of what's presented. But there is some sensitivity analysis that is presented so that you can see if the expectation is that the markets were going to increase 7% and only increase 6%, you can kind of see what that's going to do to that liability.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Pages 13 and 14. So these is going to outline some of the factors bearing on the district's future. So within those pages, it talks a little bit about the 2021 budget, talks a little bit more about the impact of COVID, as well as some of the changes in enrollment trends and PISA's impact. So you can look to those pages for a little bit more information as it relates to the things that management thought were important to the readers of the financial statements. Like we talked about before, pages 15 and 16, this starts to get into the actual presentation of the financial information. Pages 15 and 16 are more of a long-term view of the district's finances. So this presents your capital assets, your long-term liabilities that are not typically presented or that are not presented on a short-term basis on your financial statements that are on pages 17 and 19. So pages 17 and 19 for your governmental funds is on the same basis that your budget is prepared on. So it's a more short-term view of the district's financial position. And pages 15 and 16 is more of a long-term view. And there are reconciliations on pages 18 and 20 that will show you the differences and reconcile the differences between those statements between your short-term and long-term view. So I would look to those two statements to get a better understanding of why your, you know, the information that you typically look at on a month-to-month basis or a short-term view is different than your long-term financial statements in terms of presenting your capital assets, non-current liabilities, accrued interest, and things of that nature. Beyond those pages, pages 21 through 23 is the statement of net position, changes in net position related to your food service fund and internal service fund. Again, your internal service fund is just presenting the financial information as it relates to your participation in the Delaware County Healthcare Trust. And then, like I said, the proprietary information related to your food service fund on those pages. And there's a cash flow statement as well that's presented on page 23. Beyond your financial statements, pages 26 to 49 are the footnotes to the financial statements. Again, this is going to provide information about the district's significant accounting policies, different information about your capital assets in terms of roll forward and changes year over year. It'll provide some more expansive knowledge about your OPEB and pension plans, some of which we just discussed in terms of that sensitivity analysis, as well as some of the deferred inflows and outflows that are related to some of the assumptions that are built into that analysis. So all that information is disclosed in your footnotes on pages 26 to 49. Beyond your footnotes, the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, want to highlight this a little bit. So those pages outline the money that was spent relative to federal funding that the district received for the year. The district did spend approximately $2 million in federal funds in the fiscal 2020 year. That is a pretty significant increase from your recent trends in prior years. And that's largely related to some of the COVID funding that you received. I think there was nearly $800,000 of revenue and expenditures related to those grants that were spent and shown as receivable as of the end of the fiscal 2020 year. Because you do receive more than $750,000 in federal awards, a single audit's required. So we did perform a single audit, and the program that was audited as major was your IDA program. We issued an unmodified opinion on compliance. We evaluated the internal controls surrounding that particular program and did not find any deficiencies in terms of our evaluation related to those controls. We also evaluated all the specific compliance requirements relative to administering that program and we did not have any findings to report as it related to our audit. A summary of those findings and information that I just disclosed is on page 66 of the audit report. And sorry to backtrack for just a minute. On pages 61 and 62, or 62 and 63, as well as 64 and 65, are some additional reports. 62 to 63 is our report on internal control over financial reporting. And again, we evaluated the internal controls, didn't find anything that we warranted communication to the board or that we thought needed improvement. And pages 64 to 65 is our report on compliance. Again, our evaluation of compliance did not find any deficiencies or any findings that were related to the major program, the special education cluster or IDA program that we evaluated. So again, that's just a kind of a high level brief summary of the audit report. It's a large, lengthy document. But if anybody's had the ability to look through that in a little bit more detail and has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
I have a question. Can I
Yes.
jump right in? It's just one area. So our bond rating, I read it in here somewhere. It's
Okay.
Do you remember what it is? I think it's AAA.
AAA1, I think.
Is that the same as it was last year?
Yes, there has not been any change negative to the bond ratings, correct.
Because I think it did change a couple years ago. I don't know if you did our audit a couple years ago. Do you recall?
Yes, we have. The ratings do periodically change. I do not recall any recent changes. I mean, it may have been a few years ago that the ratings changed, but there, to my knowledge of late, there has not been any negative impact to your bond ratings that would impact rates or issuance or refundings of your debt.
Yeah, no, I think our bond rating improved when it was changed, but maybe it was more than a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And they noted in the audit report that one of the reasons was because of our fund balance. So I didn't see any real discussion of fund balance, you know, sort of in your highlights of this.
We briefly discussed the fund balance. It was about $24 million. Again, allowed to have a maximum unassigned fund balance of about 8%. And it's really just a matter of again, overall, that's a healthy fund balance in relation to a lot of our other districts that we audit. But you guys seem to be very particular and specialized in terms of how you're committing those funds, and you really have a plan for the use of those funds, which is really important, especially when you have a larger fund balance. It's really important, I think, for the public as well as for the board to understand how those funds are going to be spent in future years, and to really have a plan associated with the use of that, in particular to the sensitivity of taxpayers.
Right. So I know that there was a specific note in an audit, it probably was several years ago, that really just commended us on our fund balance. And so I didn't see anything specific about that, you know, in your description of this. But so you're basically saying, you know, that in your opinion, this is an adequate or a good fund balance. We have been rewarded for that in the past with our bond rating. So is there anything, you know, narrative wise that you would say with regard to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that your fund balance is certainly adequate based off of the expenditures in future years. So, I mean, when we talk about the unassigned fund balance being 8% of next year's budget, if you look at your overall fund balance, it's, you know, essentially, you know, an additional 2 times that. So you have an additional $16 million that's being committed for specific use. And again, sometimes given what we're going through this year, it's important to have a healthy fund balance because you never know how, obviously what's going to happen. I think what you're referring to in terms of commending and talking to fund balance specifically in some of the prior audit reports is there was a note or there was something including, I think, in the management discussion and analysis that compared your fund balance to some of the other school districts that are of similar size in the area. I think that just got a little bit more in terms of timing, not really having maybe some of that information as it related to the timing of the presentation of your audit, some of them not being finished, some of that being a little bit more variable, kind of presented, I think, some presentation issues, which is why I think, us in concert with management elected to kind of eliminate that comparison, maybe a couple of years ago. But certainly, we audit, 30 plus school districts in Pennsylvania. So we see a lot of these numbers. And I would certainly say that we have no concerns with regard to your fund balance in terms of its size and health as you move forward into the future years.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that public, and I wanted to just have you, basically comment on that because it has been of interest, obviously, to the taxpayers and the community.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about the PSERS piece. So I guess about 6 or so years ago, we experienced a huge spike in that. And I see from this that it looks like it's stabilized pretty much now at a hefty amount, but you don't foresee that becoming another liability or basically having a big jump again?
In terms of contribution rates or in terms of the liability itself?
Well, with regard to what the school district had to contribute, because we were hit with a big jump, a huge bounce that basically was kind of unfunded for a while. And so we had this outstanding liability that we were planning for. But is it going to be stabilizing now?
The employer contribution for PSERS contributions has stabilized. We've not seen those big increases that we had in the past. So we have seen that stabilize. What you're seeing in the MD&A and in parts of the audit is what our liability is for our employee and in our employer share for everybody in the event that they would retire. So that's what you're seeing there. That's why there's that great big number. And one of the things, just talking about the fund balance very quickly, that we do differently in Radnor than some of our neighboring districts is if you look on page 9 and the MD&A, you'll see information about the fund balance. And you'll see that in the committed fund balance, there's a large amount for capital projects. We leave that in Fund 10 in the general fund so that it gives us more flexibility. Many districts will transfer that over to their capital projects fund, and then it won't show as part of their general fund balance. And what that does is once you've transferred it over to Fund 32, your capital projects fund, you cannot bring it back and use it for Fund 10 expenses. So we feel that this gives us a lot more flexibility. Anytime by board resolution, it can be moved and utilized for a different purpose if necessary.
All right,
yeah,
thank you.
From that, what Michelle's saying about transferring, a lot of people wait, they look at what their fund balance is at the end of the year and the excess funds that they have available, whether that be over the 8% for unassigned or just whatever their capital project plan is based on their 5-year, 10-year plans. They're moving money into their capital reserve. But to Michelle's point, you have a lot more flexibility by committing it, leaving it in a general fund. Versus the restrictions that are in place by moving it to a capital reserve fund. And with regard to the contribution rates, there is, if you want to see a summary on page 14 in the future factors in the management's discussion and analysis, it lists the projected employer contribution rates over the next 5 years. So you can see that has stabilized and kind of normalized where that was jumping significantly 6-7 years ago when first implemented. showing this liability on the books and really realizing how great of a liability existed that was unfunded. And now that's kind of more normalized and stabilized year to year, that you have a better idea of what your actual cost is going to be.
Yeah. All right, good. Thank you. That's
You're
all I
welcome.
have for now.
Okay, is there anybody else? All right, well, if there's no,
I have a
oh,
question.
Bradley, I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, Bradley, you're muted.
First, just for those of you who did not watch the Finance Committee meeting, we had a pretty good discussion there also about bond rating and fund balance. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, Mr. Moog's colleague, Mr. Hogan, got into some detail there too. And the headline is the same: by maintaining healthy fund balances, we're able to maintain that AA1 rating in part. And I think, Mrs. Solomon, you're remembering we were at AA2 sometime in the last 10 years. I don't think the change was that recent. But I did have a question related to that. Also on that page 13 to 14 summary, there's discussion of the Act 1 index and how the Act 1 index limits school boards' abilities to raise revenue. If there were some change in whatever it would be, state policy, state law, or circumstances, such that something even more constrictive than the Act 1 index we've been seeing were to come into being, would that potentially impact either the opinion about the long-term health of the district or potentially that rating, that bond rating? Is that the kind of thing that auditors and maybe even bond counsel, bond funders look at as well?
Yeah, I mean, that stuff's a little bit slow to be rolled out in terms of, what's coming down from the state. It's probably something that your bond counsel is going to be a little bit more in tune with in terms of, what you're able to do in terms of evaluating your fund balance and evaluating your borrowing capacity. Again, we do look at your borrowing capacity. There's no issues there in terms of, what you're allowed to do based off of. I mean, they look at your previous 3 years revenues. There's a formula that, basically takes the average of the 3 years and multiplies it by 2.25%, which is essentially what your borrowing capacity is. And based off of your general obligation debt at the end of the year, you guys are nowhere near where we would express any concern that you're approaching that or would have lack the ability to borrow funds if needed, should any circumstance arise. But given the robust nature of your fund balance, I don't anticipate that being an issue whatsoever. But from our perspective, we haven't heard anything that would indicate that there's significant changes coming that would be impactful or warrant discussion really at this point.
All right, thanks. Yeah, that's my only question for Mr. Mood, and maybe the only other thing to mention about fund balances, just really a thank you to the administration and Ms. Deco. We talked a little bit also in the Finance Committee about how we have this practice of being ready for big expenditures, putting a little bit into the curriculum, allocating a little bit for curriculum every year, allocating a little bit for technology every year for capital, so that we're not crippled by any kind of large expenditures that do come up for those longer cycle items. So I'm thankful that this is something that had been in place for some time when I joined the board a year ago, and I'm thankful for it.
I just had two quick questions. Did all of the COVID money come in neatly before June 30th, the close of the fiscal year?
Not all of it. Some money was expended. There's some that trickled into 2021, and some of it that was spent wasn't all received. So the revenue expenditures are in your financial statements, but that there were some receivables in terms of like the actual cash flow of the money coming in 2021.
Okay. And was it this past year where we found, I think there was some extra Title I money separate from COVID that was sought and received?
I don't recall that offhand, it being this year. I believe that may have been in the prior year.
Might have been the prior, I'm not sure exactly which year. We did have some carryover dollars, in the title programming. And we also shifted our title program the Title I program from targeted to school-wide. So that was some of the shift we also made.
Okay, great. Thank you. I thought something like that happened this year. Thanks.
And Amy, we've received all of our COVID funds as of right now. We have a $5,000 grant that we haven't expended yet, the special ed mitigation grant. And then we've just filed for a grant through PCCD for about $105,000, which we're waiting to hear on.
And maybe another package to come soon too.
Well, Michelle, this is the point at which I thank you. So you create a budget, and typically when we look at our audit, we come, somewhere around 2%, give or take, with some expenses might be up, some revenue might be up, some things are down, some things are up. But generally speaking, our year-end numbers end somewhere right around 2%, which is really tremendous. You do a lot of forecasting, and the timing of our budget cycle is one that you're working, very far out in advance as you're doing these budget assumptions. And so in a year when we had COVID and we really didn't know a lot of what was going to happen, and some things we did and some things we didn't do, and expenses, to land on a budget and land on an audit that's, basically a little over 3% of what you budgeted, that's really, excellent work. Thank you. That, 97% accuracy, that's really very good. So thank you for that good work. Thank you for working with the auditors. And, this is a clean audit. The takeaway from this is a clean audit. There's nothing remarkable or of concern as it relates to the way in which the district is run, from a financial accounting perspective. We have a good credit rating. We have a healthy fund balance, and a strategic fund balance, not just a healthy one, but a strategic one. Mr. Moore spoke to that a few minutes ago. And when I was mentioning earlier with Dr. Hand about, how will we be accounting for perhaps a tech refresh that may be, we compressed how we did our technology. So in a few years, we might have to do a refresh that's a little bigger. Well, one of our committed funds, the technology fund, will assist us in that. So this is the kind of long-term planning that really holds a district and carries us through, tough years. And we're entering into our reassessment year, and there are still unknowns with PSERS. So I feel like we are well positioned, and I'm grateful to the administration for that, to kind of weather some still uncertainty in our future. If there's no further discussion, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And the motion passes Mr. Moore, 9-0. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Mr. Mood. I think he's still here. Oh, great. Thank you. And we are going to move on in our agenda. We have I'm working electronically. We have our consent agenda now. So although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussions on these items. With the consent of all board members, they are therefore grouped, and approval is given in one motion. In the event a board member wants to discuss any item, the board president will move it to an appropriate place on the agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda tonight that anyone would like to pull? Okay, so seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve items 11.1 through 15.3.
So moved.
And a second? So a motion from Ms. Solomon and a second from Ms. Dunn. All those in favor? And the consent agenda passes 9-0. Thank you, everyone. I would like to just take a quick moment to note and thank the Radnor Maintenance and Educational Support Personnel Agreement was part of our consent agenda tonight. And thank Ms. Goldman and Ms. Monahan for working with Mr. Stitzel and Ms. Deco to again, bring us to another. We have a tentative agreement signed with them. And I'd like to thank that group. Our maintenance and custodial, our maintenance staff has been really critical in doing a heck of a lot of construction this year and adjusting to help us weather COVID. So we are really grateful for this agreement. It extends their contract for a year. And, we'll take up this discussion at a later time. All righty, we have reports from board liaisons. Up first is Delaware County Community College. Ms. Solomon.
No report.
Delaware County Intermediate Unit, Ms. Goldman.
Okay, sorry about that. The DCIU board met on both December 2nd for its regular board meeting and December 9th for its committee meetings. Main items on the agenda for December 2nd were personnel action items, student services items for services DCIU provides to educational entities. They're doing their reapplication for their federal early Head Start and Head Start grants. They had curriculum instruction and professional learning items, a number of facilities items, including the approval of renovations to several DCIU facilities, approval of several information technology purchases, and a second reading of board policy 005 organization. Then on the main items on the agenda for December 9th are something that will sound very familiar, which were the DCIU and Delaware County Technical School audit reports. So it's audit season everywhere. Also, there was a discussion of a huge firewall upgrade that needs to be done throughout their system. The next two DCIU board meetings will be on January 6th and 13th.
Great. Federal Relations Network, Dr. Babson.
Okay, so actually a couple of things to report about. This year, usually we have our national meeting, but due to COVID, there won't be the usual meeting in January. So that is going to be rescheduled, however, and kind of combined with a couple of other events to form they're calling it an online experience, the NSBA 2021 online experience, which is basically, again, as I was kind of hinting at, kind of a combination of different events that NSBA does nationally for board members. And so the registration for that, more information can be found on the NSBA website. Registration opens tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So you can check that out as you'd be interested. Also, there's an equity symposium that is online. It often takes place in the fall, but this time they moved it to February. And this year they're going to be focusing on dismantling institutional racism in education to ensure all students receive equitable access to an education that maximizes their potential. And this is something that the NSBA leadership saw as a really important focus for this year. So in any case, registration is now open. And again, that will be taking place on February 10th, 2021.
Great. Thank you so much. Delaware County School Board's Legislative Council. Mr. Moore.
There was a meeting on November 11th that was an election recap meeting. I didn't report on it last meeting because I did not attend the last regular business meeting. So thank you, board members, for abiding my absence last month. And so in that election recap meeting, we got information about what had happened primarily at the state level and maybe who some of our local representatives were, who was reelected, who leadership would be at the state level in the legislature. So we'll carry that information forward as we continue to interact with those legislators and advocate on behalf of our schools. There is a legislative council meeting again tomorrow morning at 8:30. So we'll get some more information at that time and we'll report thereafter.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Pennsylvania School Boards Association, Dr. Babson.
Okay, so actually there's a number of things that I could report on, lots of stuff going on at PSBA. I just want to hit the highlights though. PSBA advocacy has affected the process of a number of different laws. Just a handful of them, just to mention a student vision screening law, a broadband accessibility funding program, in a school code, the school code bill that has various changes, most notably related to COVID, but also assessment, et cetera. That's Senate Bill 1216 that we've discussed. There's also been a few actions by PDE worth noting that the PSBA has been involved in. So the PDE has waived requirements for performance data and employee ratings. PDE states that this action furthers the department's position that any statewide assessments administered during 2021 should not be used for high stakes purposes. Also, PSBA has mentioned that they have been in contact with PDE about updates to the PDE's COVID-19 community transmission information stream. So they provide a number of links on their website about that.
Great, thank you. Parks and Recreation. Is that going to be Ms. Dunn or Dr. Babson?
I'll just say that neither Sarah nor I were able to attend due to board meetings on that date. The next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, January 9th.
Great, thank you. Radnor Educational Foundation, Ms. Duffy.
Yes, well, we have not met, REF has not met since our last business board meeting, which REF was really front and center with its big technology grant. I do know that they're planning right now, they're in the process of planning a Valentine's event in February, so we can stay tuned for some details in January.
Super. And I know I just got my REF campaign, end of year campaign in the mail, so hopefully everyone did. And
great, thanks. Yes.
Great. Radnor Alumni Council, Mr. Moore.
This could be the last Radnor Alumni Council report, and I'll give a little bit of information about why that is. So the Radnor Alumni Council has not been meeting, and there have been several occasions where I've delivered no report, and even some of my predecessors in this liaison role have been in that position. Also, moving forward, we wanted to think of other ways to involve the alumni more in their interactions with the school board, but also with the school district as a whole. And so where we are right now is I had a conversation with Mr. Chris Becerro. He was one of the people instrumental in the Radnor Alumni Council. And just by way of background, the Radnor Alumni Council was designed in part with the idea of coordinating a lot of different groups. There's a high school alumni association, there's REF, some of these groups have their own contact lists for alumni. And so an alumni council, it was thought at least, could coordinate and interact and put different activities together and get information out to alumni. Since it hasn't really been meeting, what we're thinking is there could be a different way to think about how the district interacts with its alumni. This is a conversation I had only with Ms. Stern so far, so we don't know what this will look like. And in fact, Ms. Goldman mentioning policy 5, I believe it was, in the policy manual, talking about committee assignments versus liaisons. I was actually looking at that policy earlier today for a different reason. I wanted to see if there was any formal procedure related to what we would have to do as a board to change around one of our liaison roles that's listed as kind of one of our standing liaison roles. And as Ms. Goldman told us earlier, there is in fact, that policy was actually about committees anyway, not about liaison roles. So where this conversation will go next is I'll continue speaking with the board president and board leadership about other ways we can connect the board and the school district as a whole with its alumni. But at this time, the Radnor Alumni Council is not expected to continue to meet. And so you may consider this report to be a sign-off for that liaison role.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, I'll bring it up in new business. Radnor High School Scholarship Fund.
Yes, we haven't been meeting due to COVID, but want to put another, I know I've mentioned this last month, but tis the season for giving. The Radnor High School Scholarship Fund's community campaign. Hopefully everyone has received the brochure that outlines our wonderful recipients of the scholarship and what your donation will mean to more deserving students in the coming year. If you misplaced your mail, because it came probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, the website is radnorscholarshipfund.org. and right on the home page, you can click to make a donation. And just like the Radnor Educational Foundation, both wonderful causes for our students and our community. Difficult times. Santa could not make it this year to have breakfast with our families, but boy, next year will be all the sweeter. So that is our report for now, and we'll see you in 2021.
Thank you. Let's see, Radnor Page, Ms. Dunn.
I too have no report. Radnor Page has not met in ages.
Okay. Radnor Committee for Special Education, Ms. Monahan.
There's no real news to report for the Radnor Committee of Special Ed. An upcoming meeting is scheduled for February 9th with administration.
Okay. Okay, great. New business. Do we have any new business? As a point of information, I will bring up a new business. So Mr. Moore mentioned the Radnor Alumni Council, and several board members have mentioned to me ideas they have about other community groups that perhaps, would want or would like, board recognition liaison status. And we do not have a policy around that, Mr. Moore. There was a policy that was in its infancy stage dating back to sometime in 2015 or 2014 with Dr. Kelly, one of our former superintendents. And so, I think, leadership will discuss this with Mr. Batchelor, and we'll talk about what might make sense moving forward. All righty, board announcements. Our next round of committee meetings will begin January 5th, 2021. They will be virtual, curriculum, a special board meeting of the whole to conduct facilities business. And then on January 12th, we'll have our policy, finance, and government relations and communications committee meetings beginning at 5 p.m. on January 12th. On January 19th, we will have our curriculum committee meeting and another special board meeting of the whole to conduct facilities committee work. And then on Tuesday, January 26th, we will have our regular business meeting, which at this time is slated to be virtual, and that will be January 26th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Mr. Petiti or Ms. Gangle, do we have any public comment at this time? Mr. Batchelor, do you know if we have any additional public comment?
We have no more public comment this evening.
Okay, great. All right, so at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. A motion from Ms. Solomon, a second from Mr. Moore. All those in favor? The motion passes 9-0. Good night, everyone. Happy holidays. Please stay safe and socially distance and wear a mask, and we will see you in 2021. Is everyone ready to say goodbye to this year? Exactly. Good night, everyone. Thank you.